What is up, everybody? This is the Sharp Angles podcast. This is the Thursday early edition, talking about the fantasy football week to come. There is a Thursday later edition with Todd Burrows and Ryan McChrystal talking about betting and DFS. You should listen to that podcast. It's very good. Occasionally, I have to step in and guest host on that podcast, and it is worse when I guest host. But it's really good when I'm not there. So make sure you go and listen to that. We're going to talk about the fantasy football slate with the one, the only, the Swami of Konami, Mr. Rich Hribar, Lord Reeves. How you doing?
Doing good. It's October. My wife put all the Halloween stuff out in the yard already. So, we're big Halloween people. So all that stuff is out and up. And we had some bye weeks, which was cool because I lost power for multiple hours yesterday. And I was really grateful that I didn't have to make up a ton of ground.
A couple things to respond. First of all, my wife loves decorating for all the holidays, so Halloween is definitely on that list. And she made these I don't know. I guess you would describe them like scarecrows, except they're like I don't know. They kind of look like Dementors to me. But she just has them. She hasn't put them out yet because we were getting some bad weather, which I'll get to in a second. But they're just in the kitchen, and so I'll come downstairs at like 1 a.m.
Just
to
sitting at
make
the
a
table.
sandwich, live that writer schedule that we live, and I'm like, what the hell? Like it'll scare you. But anyway, we both had house related issues. Your power went out yesterday. I woke up this morning to the pergola in the backyard half hanging off of the porch that it's attached
Good
to.
times.
So after we get done recording this podcast, I'm gonna get to do some demolition. I should film it. Like I should try to make it like an HGTV show of me demolishing
Yeah, you can
what the
meme it.
remnants of
This
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 pergola.
is what it's like to drop Kyle Pitts. I don't know. Like you could just meme it.
I did. I dropped Kyle Pitts in a league this week for Cole Kmet. What a time to be alive. What a
Oh,
time to
baby.
be alive. Anyway, enough about what's going on in our lives. We'll get to fantasy football though. Before we do, I do want to mention that we have a ton of great content over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. The large majority of it is written by Rich Hribar, including his worksheet preview, game by game preview for every single game, every single week. It is amazing. It's the best way to get ready for the weekend, both for fantasy and for betting. You can go check it out as part of our fantasy packages, as part of our all access packages. And if you use the code ANGLES, you can get 15% off any of those packages. That code is in the description below. So go and check that out. Also, if you're listening to this as a podcast, we thank you. Thank you for downloading. We really do appreciate it. However, do want you to know we do this live every single Thursday at 11:30 Eastern. So if you get over to our YouTube, just go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp. You'll find our channel, subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate it. And you'll get notifications for when we go live. So just a lot of stuff out there for y'all over in the Sharp Football Metaverse. Is that what we're calling it? The Sharp Football Metaverse?
Yeah, we'll see if we can come up with something good. It's got to be something sharp related.
Yeah, Sharp. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Uh, we don't want to get sued by old by old Zuckerberg with our metaverse. We'll get something. The Sharp reverse. All right, let's move on to talking about what we do every week, which is real or fake. What was real? What was fake? Coming out of week 4, we do have some interesting ones coming out of this, and the first one is Jaleel McLaughlin, who we had talked about. Like you brought him up in I think week 1 at like you said,
Mhm.
hey, it's interesting that they kept this guy on the yeah, there we go, real versus fake. Perfect. Thanks, producer Heather. Producer Heather has made me look great with the picture she chose to use. So I really do appreciate the 60 pounds ago picture that we're using there. So thank you for that graphic. But yeah, we talked about him I think in week 1 about how it was interesting they kept him on the roster. And when you have a young player like this, they keep on the roster. They're giving him touches, and then we see Javonte Williams go out on in week 4. We don't really know how severe the injury was. He did not practice on Wednesday. We're recording this before, Thursday practice reports come out. I get the impression he's going to miss some time. Given
Mhm.
the injury that he's coming back from, it makes sense for them to give him some rest. And then we saw McLaughlin come in, get 10 touches, and really do work with it. So what do you think about his role, I guess, if Javonte Williams is out? And then do we think McLaughlin is somebody that they're just gonna keep getting involved as we move on through the season?
But the latter, I do think, is true. I mean, we're at a kind of a fulcrum point in Javonte Williams' career now. He's so young
Yep.
that
Yeah.
obviously but if you're like a dynasty gamer, Javonte Williams now is what? He's going to be an expiring rookie deal, kind of with no like true breakout, and kind of like where we were with Dobbins kind of coming into this year. And
Yeah.
you just hope that like there's some turnaround here, but it is kind of because this regime has no ties to Javonte Williams, so it is kind of a weird spot that he is in the dynasty landscape. But I do think they are going to involve Jaleel McLaughlin. They've done nothing but signal they like him through the preseason, through week 2 when they gave him that first inside the 5 carry the team had, and then last week when Javonte Williams went out. Now Samaje Perine still led the backfield in snaps, and they were trailing in that game by definitely in the second half of that game. So are we going to get game script, against this Jets team? We would think at home they should be able to be in game script to give Jaleel McLaughlin carries. We've seen Isaiah Pacheco, have a good game against the Jets last week, even though it is a tougher matchup. We saw earlier in the season Tony Pollard catch a bunch of passes against the Jets. So there's an opportunity here for him to be like kind of a low-level flex. But if somehow the Jets like really stymie this, Broncos offense because they're still doing a lot of weird things. They had 11 guys get targets last week. That's not very cool. Playing a ton of guys, and they fall behind in game script and we see more Samaje Perine, are we going to be able to live on the rushing efficiency that he had against the Bears? So there's some volatility, I do think, with Jaleel McLaughlin. I don't think he's just like a smash flex RB2 type of guy. There is, like I said, going to be more of a little boom or bust aspect to him this week. But I do think he's going to be involved largely the rest of the season and in some capacity.
Yeah, and you kind of talking about that point. He had 2 touchdowns and 2 touches and his touchdown before Javonte Williams was hurt. So that was not just Javonte gets hurt and then he's coming in. He was getting used a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
His usage the week before was all garbage time. So you're not taking a lot out of that. But I think this is a situation where they'll get him involved. Although we've been thinking the same thing about Marvin Mims for weeks, and that hasn't happened. And so
once again, won
them
the game, had another 48-yard catch. He still leads the team in receiving yards, despite only fewer than 40 pass routes on now in the season.
Wild. It's absolutely wild. Tom in the chat asks, will he turn into Kamara with Sean Payton by the end of the season? That's kind of an interesting one. We put Sean Payton we put Samaje Perine in that kind of Pierre Thomas role.
Right.
That was kind of the way we conceived it in our brains. And Rich and I are old men. We have to talk about Pierre Thomas. We don't know who this Alvin Kamara is. PT Cruiser, baby.
Did PT Cruiser? They don't make PT Cruisers anymore, do they?
I don't think so.
They're obsolete, right? Yeah, I don't think they do.
Yeah, I did have a manager in one of my college jobs that had a PT Cruiser. She was super proud of it, and I was like, that car sucks. But
with at least have like the fake wood grain paneling on the side of them.
It did. Yeah, it did.
Yes.
And then they also made like Chevy made like the HHR or something like that, which looked very similar. So yeah, great times, the mid-aughts. But anyway, so yeah. So I think that, Jaleel McLaughlin could kind of get involved.
I think the bottom line to answer your question, though, is that
sure.
like, is really ever Javonte Williams going to be a thing? And I think that's
the question.
I think that's the real question that we're asking. Like, if you're holding Javonte Williams, are you ever going to get a run out? And I'm going to lean no.
Which hurts me. I'll be very honest with you in best ball mania. That would be very hurtful. But I kind of think we're leaning that way. And although I do wonder, the thing about McLaughlin is he's been very explosive. He's been much more explosive than Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams has 3 carries of 10 or more yards on 38 attempts. McLaughlin has 3 on 13 carries. So like he's been much more explosive. But we kind of expect Javonte Williams to be that way. And I do wonder if maybe he gets some time off now because of this hip injury. When he comes back, he looks better. But if it's a 3-way backfield, then it's just they're not going to get enough carries. It's just not going to be there. And you're going to be hoping for a touchdown or a big play. So
in this defense, man, like you look at the Broncos, like they have a nice they had Bears, and obviously they woke up the mighty dormant Bears last week. And then you have Jets this week, and we'll see if Zach Wilson rolls over. But you look at the rest of this Broncos schedule and the offenses they face. Like, boy, they are going to be giving up a lot of points this season. I mean, they still have 2 games against the Chiefs. They play the Bills. They play the Vikings. They play the Chargers twice. They play the Lions. Like, we're getting a lot of points scored on this defense.
Yeah, it's bad. Like, imagine being the defense that is worse than the Bears. Imagine living in that world. It's it's not great. And by the way, Sam Howell, he's coming off another good game. We're gonna start believing in Sam Howell, and now he gets the Bears defense on Thursday night. If you're listening to this after, you'll know already what has happened. But hey,
How
we're
many
hoping for the
sacks in
best.
that game? What's this?
Uh,
For you to take the under, what would the line have to be?
6, 7? No, I still think I take the. So let's go 7.5. 7.5, I
Combined. Yeah,
think, is maybe
combined
the number.
sacks.
Combined sacks. I did look at if you parlayed the Commanders to record a sack and the Bears to record a sack, it was still minus 1,000. If you
Yep.
parlayed it, it was still minus 1,000. So yeah, they're going to be some sacks in that game. Speaking of that game, Justin Fields, and we'll talk about this if you listen to it after. You're already going to kind of know. But we're recording this ahead of Thursday night, and I think it's interesting. We mentioned the Broncos defense. Justin Fields comes out and has easily his best game of the season, his best passing game of his
His
career.
career.
Is it in that conversation? Like, he had a really good passing game. The Bears it and ended up losing anyway, and he throws an interception late, and it is what it is. But one of the things I found interesting about that game from Fields was that his off-target rate was easily his lowest of the season. A bad defense can do that. The windows are larger, you feel more comfortable. But what I really thought was interesting is he threw nearly a quarter of his passes in between 10 and 20 yards, which is different than the way that they had been attacking defenses previously. He had not been above 14% in any other game. He was 6 for 9 for 114 yards, so 14.8 yards per attempt in that area. He had been bad previously in that area, but I do wonder if maybe this offense, maybe this passing game figured something out about kind of the where Justin Fields is comfortable and the way they should be using DJ Moore and Cole Kmet and things like that. So I am interested at least to watch where this goes. We have a long enough history of Justin Fields not being a great passer in the NFL that I'm not going to get super excited about it. But when you see a change like that, you at least go, okay, at least this is something we should pay attention to kind of moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the Bears, as bad as they were even last year, they were like a good team in terms of like calibration as the season went on. Like things that were working, they started incorporating more to the offense. Now, they didn't do any of those things the first 3 weeks this year. It took the
That's
Broncos.
that's the thing. Can we talk about that? Like, last year you find out that you need to get Justin Fields on designed runs, and then you come out this season and go, no, I guess we're not gonna do that again. And then, by the way, last week we got excited in week 3 because he had 7 designed runs. Last week he's back down to 2. So you're
Yeah.
right, they do calibrate, but you're like, we
Yep.
don't remember from year to year.
And last year, towards the end of the year, when they had just basically that, I don't know, that group of vagabonds, like Equiminius St. Brown and and Keel Harry was starting at some point for them, and they were scheming those guys open for downfield shot plays, and then now you like, all right, well, you get Mooney back healthy, we have. We had DJ Moore. Now Chase Claypool's not a thing, but you have like these better players, and they're not doing any of that. But we'll see. They have a nice little favorable like pocket here of, I'm building off the Broncos of Commanders, Vikings, the Raiders, and then like things get harder. I think big picture, obviously I think if Fields has another good game, I think I might try to package him with something and try to look for a quarterback upgrade. I have someone in my weekly chat that has Fields and Richardson. And they asked me to start sit like every week. And I'm like, you got to move on from Fields. Like we got to get rid of Fields. And try. So
That's a trade,
hopefully,
especially if he goes big tonight. That's, if you're listening to this person in the chat, that's a trade Justin Fields, especially if he goes big on Thursday.
because I think you look big picture too when they have the late season bye. When you're looking at fantasy playoff time, they've got Lions, Browns, Cardinals, Falcons. And you're not necessarily scared because he has the rushing ability, but like those are matchups where I probably don't expect a lot of passing ceiling, especially like we got last week. And we don't know if the rushing is ever going to come around. It's interesting too. We're seeing a lot of reduced rushing for a lot of the quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts' rushing is way down so far this year. And I don't think anyone's really paid any attention to that.
Yeah, it hasn't been well. It's been masked by the short touchdowns,
The
right?
brotherly
And so,
shove.
exactly. So his rushing points per game, I haven't looked at it, but I assume it's not down big if it even is down. But that's been masked by touchdowns. You can't really trust those. And so it'll be interesting to see. Like last week, he didn't get in a rushing touchdown, am I correct? But he was able to have a massive game through
Passing
the
day,
air
yeah.
because AJ
Yep.
Brown was able to destroy the Commanders' defense. literally just out there reaving souls. It was wild. Everything the Eagles defense wasn't able to do, AJ Brown said it's all right. I got it, and put the team on his back. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to kind of see all of that moving forward. Also moving forward, I want to talk about Brandon Aiyuk. And all I put in here in the notes is Brandon Aiyuk the clear number one wide receiver for the 49ers? Am I late on this? Have you been on this already? I seem to recall you thinking that maybe Brandon Aiyuk's the number one. Am I misremembering?
No, I think it is true, like from an actual wide receiver stance, like what they want out of the position he plays. Like he is that guy. Like he's their clear man beater. He has been for a couple of years. But the thing with this offense in general is there's probably going to be a lot of volatility week to week because one guy's always like out looking in. You know, Deebo Samuel didn't even get a target last week because the first time in his career he didn't get a target in a game that he finished. And you know he was banged up, but he played like he wasn't limited. Like he ran a route on 86% of the dropbacks. But we're gonna have just like and we've seen it with Aiyuk in week 3, right? And obviously he got missed on the one vertical ball by Purdy that he probably scores on or at least has a huge gain on. But we probably, with the volume restrictions of this offense and how everyone's forced to rely on efficiency in this offense, have just a lean week. But I think that's fine. You just live and die with that with these these guys, right? Like you just have to play them every week. Maybe Kittle's a guy you can talk yourself into getting away from because it's a tight end. But again, it's just tight end. Like who are you like really getting away from Kittle for, right? Like, are you going to start playing? I guess you could, like, if you get Jake Ferguson, I would still do that. But like, are you going to get like Logan Thomas? Like, who cares? You're just going to ride or die with Kittle in that situation, right? Like it is what it is. But I think we'll see Debo and Aiyuk kind of oscillate a little bit in terms of fantasy performances, just by what they're both asked to do. Aiyuk is still a guy that's running like all the vertical stuff, like all the posts. Like I said, when they're in man situations, he's tasked of beating one-on-one. I think he's the most polished wide receiver. And then Debo's running all that in-breaking stuff, slants, ins. They want to get him the football in motion because when he gets the football in motion, it's really good. Good things happen. He breaks a lot of tackles. But it's kind of a tough question. I think it's a little bit more nuanced. I think they're asked to do different things in this offense. Kyle Shanahan's had all the answers the first 4 weeks. Really curious. I know we're going to talk about this game. So I'm really curious to look at them facing like this first big test again, a team that really is the only team that kind of shut Brock Purdy down because the Eagles game doesn't count last year. So I'm really curious to see like what Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn have dialed up for this one.
I think what is interesting for me and kind of this question, the way I'm looking at it, is I think we headed into the season thinking, because previously this had been the case, that we're only super interested in Brandon Aiyuk from a fantasy perspective, or at least Brandon Aiyuk as like a ceiling performer from a fantasy perspective, is Debo wasn't there, because that had been the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that is the case anymore.
No.
Like, in fact, I'm kind of leaning that it might be the other way a little bit, based on just kind of what the usage.
Well, the sample suggests the 4-game sample suggests that's correct.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where the changes come for me, is I think that that's why I'm kind of changing the order of them in my brain and the way that I'm thinking about them. If Brandon Aiyuk misses some time, well, we saw in weeks 2 and 3, right? We saw that he was Samuel with Aiyuk a little bit banged up. Samuel was definitely the ascendant receiver. But then we saw last week with Samuel banged up, then Aiyuk was there. So it could all just be a function of injuries. But it is one of those things where my perception of when we can use Brandon Aiyuk and when I'm going to be excited about Brandon Aiyuk has changed since the start of the season. I think that's kind of the
and that area of wide receiver is largely the Wild West anyways, right? Like, even if you say like you're going to rank Brandon Aiyuk as like, say, like the wide receiver, let's just say 15, like put a number on it. Like once you get to like wide receiver, probably 9 or 10, like there's like a big grouping of guys that all kind of have like similar range of outcomes. Like Jalen Waddle still hangs around there, and it's only for like upside, right? You've got guys like Devontae Smith, Calvin Ridley. Like Aiyuk is in that conversation with those guys.
Well, and that's the reason we talked about during draft season why I wanted 2 wide receivers, especially if I was at the end of the first round, is because once you got through those, and unfortunately we've lost Garrett Wilson out of that list now, but once you got through those first 10 wide receivers, then it was flat. Like it was very flat, starting with the names you mentioned, Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith and Chris Olave, although Chris Olave, I guess, has kind of
T. Higgins
maybe moved into that, that Garrett Wilson spot in that kind of top 11. But yeah, it's very flat. There are there's a lot of the same, and you're just hoping for the best. Terry McLaurin finally shows up last week, and it works out. But are you going to get excited and rank Terry McLaurin higher than 20th this week? I actually don't even know where you have him ranked this week, but it's tough. It's a tough area of wide receivers, and we're kind of just hoping. You're just throwing stuff at the wall at this
But I
point
mean, in
in that area.
context of the Brandon Aiyuk conversation, like we've got that grouping of guys, and we know that there's some volatility with all those guys, and they're all capable of spike weeks. Don't you want the guy in the offense that's consistently scoring 30 points every game?
Yes, I do. Scores 30 points. Like it's their run of scoring 30 points. Again, we're putting to the test this week. We'll talk about that game in a second, but it is it's really something that they're just doing this week after week after week after week. All right, one more here on Real and Fake is Romeo Doubs, which I thought it's interesting what his target share has been. Christian Watson has been out. Christian Watson was back last week, but he was limited. He was on a pitch count, right? No, he was on a snap count. Christian Watson was on a snap count last week, and sorry, I made myself bad. Why did I even bring it up? But I heard someone mention it, like someone in a report said that Doubs was going to be on a pitch count. It made me angry again, all over again. What are you going to do? But Romeo Doubs, we've seen he was not healthy early in the season or completely healthy. Now we've seen him come back over the last 2 weeks. Over the last 2 weeks, he has a 32.5% target share. And obviously, we can talk about, all right, Watson wasn't there for most of that, was limited for the game he was. Aaron Jones wasn't there for most of it, was limited in the game he was. But I think you mentioned something interesting in the worksheet that about how Love and Doubs had a good connection in the preseason. Doubs playing with Love in the preseason at a 22.2% target share. I actually wrote in the Packers preview that even though I liked Christian Watson better as a fantasy player, and I still do, there was a chance that Doubs is just the kind of receiver that's going to finish with the most targets on this team. And that's certainly looking more likely now that Watson's basically missed 4 games. So I'm interested if can this target share stick around for Romeo Doubs? Can Jordan Love support what we hope is 3 fantasy options with Dub, Watson, and Luke Musgrave? I don't know about that second part of it, and that's kind of what's got me confused here about Doubs.
Yeah, and you look at the Musgrave equation too. Like I was looking at some of Musgrave's usage, and he's very much on the Kyle Pitts trajectory where he's only getting the hard targets. Like we get excited, right? Because we're like, what's funny is if we could merge Luke Musgrave and the Dalton Kincaid into one player right now, their usage would be incredible. We'd have like the perfect tight end. But it's actually hurting both of them the way they're both being used. Because Kyle Pitts, one of my big hangups with Kyle Pitts for fantasy in the quarterback plays he's been attached to is like they don't give him any freebies. Like he gets all these downfield targets, and we're like, man, if he finally cashes these in, it's great, right? But they're all low leverage targets that come with a low success rate, and he's had the highest. What's that?
I have a great idea. What if they just targeted him where they target Jonnu Smith?
Yeah.
What if I don't know if
pretty cool.
What if we just do that, Arthur? What if we just target Kyle Pitts where we're targeting John? Anyway, sorry.
But that's what Musgrave's getting. Musgrave's getting like all deep targets, and he has one of the highest inaccurate target rates in the NFL because if you breathe on Jordan Love, he gets skittish and can't complete pass.
His feet are hilarious to watch. Just watch his feet. Just watch his feet whenever you're watching Jordan Love. It's amazing.
So, I mean, Musgrave's in that zone where he's very much, we got to find a way to get him easier targets because either route participation stuff doesn't matter if he's forced to just kind of cash in these vertical targets from a quarterback that is having trouble completing those passes in general. But I do think the Doubs like connection with Love, like there's a mounting sample where like there's something there. Like he's comfortable throwing certain routes to Doubs, and we've seen that. So I don't want to rule out that like he's just going to go away, that Christian Watson's going back, and maybe that just makes everyone volatile, right? There's definitely that's in the realm of possibility too. But I'm definitely interested in that. I will say the Packers are running a lot more 11 personnel, even with Christian Watson coming back. So that's a good sign that we're going to see these guys on the field at least. That was one of my kind of worries was, are they going to play slow post Aaron Rodgers? Are they going to try to run this offense through these running backs? But the running game hasn't been good, largely because it's been A.J. Dillon and not Aaron Jones, getting all the touches. So we'll see if that manifests. But they are running a lot of 11 personnel, which we do like to see.
Free Patrick Taylor, I always say, because the A.J. Dillon stuff is not working at all. Not working. One more thing. I actually even forgot to put this on the rundown because I don't know what we're going to say about it. But Jonathan Taylor's probably going to be back this week.
Maybe.
Take it away, our Zach Moss, the beautiful Zach Moss. It was fun while it lasted, buddy. What are we doing with this? I mean, he gets the Titans, which you're not excited about that matchup at all against the Titans run defense. So, do you have any thoughts on this? Because I don't. I'm really struggling to figure out what I want to do with Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, we don't really know too. Behind closed doors, that supposedly he still wants either the new contract or a trade. So does anything change on that front? What's the workload going to be if he does play? Is Zach Moss just going to go away? Is it going to be like he just takes that transitive property? Zach Moss not being able to cash in any of his carries inside the 5 last week really hurt me. It really hurt my soul.
It didn't hurt me because I completely faded him for Anthony Richardson. So we're
Yep.
calling that a win. We're calling that a win.
Doubs for you. Yes, I mean it's really tough. You would think that like you would want to have Jonathan Taylor back in this offense, right? Like we've seen kind of the opportunity that's available in this offense, and they're playing with tempo. They're playing in high scoring games. They have scoring opportunities. So we would feel good about Jonathan Taylor, but like we just don't know what's kind of going on with like the ancillary stuff that we can't answer, right? Like we can't quantify the things that are orbiting the situation. So we kind of play it by ear and see how it is. That's kind of what's going on with the Cooper Kupp thing too. Like I can't just give you an answer. We've got to kind of see some things revealed.
Yeah, the Cooper Kupp, and we'll talk about that game later, and so we can talk about it more then. But yeah, it's the same situation. We don't know. Is the answer to the question. And even if the situation's not great between Taylor and the front office, it could still be fine between Taylor and Shane Steichen. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case in the coaching staff, it's funny, we're actually seeing a similar situation in the NBA right now with James Harden and the 76ers. Is even if you hate the front office, you'd be fine with your teammates and be fine with the coaching staff and still go out there and play because you don't have to deal with the front office on a day-to-day basis. And so it'll be interesting to see how they use him. I think
if you've held Jonathan Taylor, though, you should feel relatively positive. Like, yes. I think because if he stays in the Colts, I think the situation is just better than it looked coming in. And then if you get traded, it's obviously to a team that wants to throw a new contract at him and invest in Jonathan Taylor being kind of a linchpin of their offense.
I think the chances that he sits out most of the season or the entire season are significantly smaller than I would have said in week. And so I think that's a win either way. Is you're going to get Jonathan Taylor to play at some point. Now, barring injury, obviously, there's running back and he does have this ankle thing, but it seems like he's 100% healthy. He came out and said he's 100% healthy. And so he's going to play this season, which I don't know if I could have confidently said in week 1 with all of this going down. So that's a win. All right, let's get on to some of the games. The biggest game of the week, easily the biggest game of the week. On Sunday Night Football, we actually get a good primetime game. What is this? Dude, I didn't know that this was allowed. The NFL allows us to have good primetime games, and we have one. It's the Cowboys at the 49ers. And you kind of brought up already one of the more interesting parts of this situation, and that is Brock Purdy going up against this defense, because we talked about it coming into the season. One of the reasons we were worried about Brock Purdy was his performance thus far in his career against pressure. We've still seen that this year. It's just that it hasn't mattered. This offense is so good. He hasn't, his kind of splits against pressure haven't mattered. Will it matter against this defense, which, there's some like early season inflation still in the pressure rate, but is still very easily leading the league in pressure rate. So that's going to be I think that's the most interesting matchup heading into this game.
Yeah, and it's the same, like Purdy's going to have to deal with this like the other 49er quarterbacks have dealt with this in the past. Like it's these matchups, right? Like when you have to punch up against good defenses and opponents, because we've seen like Kyle Shanahan has shown us, whether you want to use Purdy as the example, that like the amount of hand-holding he can do can coax out this level of efficiency for this offense, right? Like where you just score 30 points a week against all these other teams. But when you have to win playoff games and you have to beat quality opponents, like is there enough off script, quarterback performance stuff outside of the system that wins games? And like, he's going to have to deal with that until we get like an absolute definitive yes. So this is another one of those matchups because the one time the 49ers didn't score a lot of points when Brock Purdy started was this game last year in the playoffs. And,
exactly.
In that game, Dallas Cowboys pressured Purdy on 48.5% of his dropbacks. It was the highest rate Purdy's been pressured in his career. In that game, he was 4 of 12. For 55 yards, 4.6 yards for pass attempt under pressure. He also by far had his worst statistical game overall. When he was kept clean in that game, guess what? Offense delivered as expected. 15 to 17 when kept clean, 9.4 yards per pass attempt. So that's going to be just a real critical component is can this 49ers offensive line consistently hold up, or can the Dallas Cowboys defensive line consistently create pressure? That's kind of where we are with it. But I mean, he's been so good in the structure of the offense. I mean, last week, 20 of 21 passing. Like the dude's almost pitching a perfect game. Breaks the 49ers record for completion rate. When he's been kept clean this year, he's completing 84% of his passes, like almost 11 yards per pass, and both lead the league. So, I mean, everything's kind of firing. Shanahan's had the answers. Purdy's had the answers. So, yeah, it's going to be just one of those things to watch, because until those questions get answered with definitive yes, Purdy's going to have to live with this, right? The system quarterback stuff, everything else. So we're going to need to hit him and it's not just them winning the game. Like if the 49ers win this game again, say 19-16 or whatever that playoff game was, like it's still like you're just going to get all the same stuff. We're going to live through it on Twitter or the X machine, Threads, Blue Sky, whatever you're on. All the things are going to be like, hey, yeah, 49ers won this game, but they didn't solve this. It's just Purdy being the construct of this system.
And exclusively on Facebook now. I'm going back in time. I've decided I'm exclusive. Yeah. If they brought back MySpace, I said this the other day, if a social media company allows me to put a song on my page again that auto plays whenever you come to my profile, so you can know whatever dashboard confessional song I'm feeling at that exact moment, a la MySpace, I'm in. I'll subscribe to your social media site. You guys won't even know the emo that will hit you whenever you come to my page. I do wonder if this is going to be one of those situations where Purdy is under more pressure. Coming back to our Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk conversation, is this a better situation for Deebo Samuel? Are we going to get the ball out of his hands faster, see fewer of those deeper shots? Are we going to see more, can Christian McCaffrey be more involved in this offense? I don't know. But are we going to see more of that kind of lean towards the passing? So I am interested. Kittle, could this be, an interesting kind of Kittle situation? So I'm interested to see how are they going to mitigate this pressure, because the Cowboys are going to get pressured. That's what they do. That's what they're very, very good at. And so how are we going to help Brock Purdy? We know he has this weakness. How are we going to help Brock Purdy kind of deal with that will be interesting to see. On the other side, the Cowboys have offensive issues of their own, specifically in the red zone. They're 30th in red zone touchdown rate. They have a touchdown on just 36.8% of their red zone trips, which is a massive departure from where they were last season. But you wrote about this before the year. Regression comes for us all, and it seems to have come for this Cowboys offense.
Yeah, I mean they had a 71.4% red zone conversion rate last year, number one in the NFL. They were one of, I think it was 10 teams to have a red zone conversion rate of touchdown rate of over 70%. Like all those teams historically scored fewer touchdowns. It's the way it works. I mean, the good thing about the Cowboys though is they're getting lots of red zone chances, right? Like you can be bad at converting red zone touchdowns, but you can still score points if you're getting there all the time. They're number one in the NFL in rate of drives to reach the red zone. Or score prior. So that's good. That's still a feather in a cap. So that not all regression is a complete boogeyman. But we've only seen the Cowboys offense have to really play one game this year, and they weren't good that game. Really, where the defense wasn't creating all these just jailbreak environments. Listen, I was someone that late swapped to CeeDee Lamb, and he scores that first touchdown in the first quarter. I'm like, all right, yes, get me out of this hole, CeeDee. And then the Cowboys just immediately scored 2 defensive touchdowns. And I was just like, well, that's done. We're not going to see that the rest of the game. But, week 3 against the Cardinals, they had to pass themselves back into that game. They couldn't. They didn't do it. So, we've only had one small sample of this offense having to kind of elevate, and they did not answer. They're going to have to do something here. They're not going to have a ton of turnovers and defensive touch. I don't believe in this game, even if they do create a lot of pressure. So, we're going to need some a more run of an output than we've seen so far from this passing game. In week 2, they were good against a good Jets defense. Their game plan was good. Dak Prescott was 31 of 38 in that game. I think they had a sound approach in that game. Let's see what they do here. The 49ers defense has been good again, but they've also had a few lapses where they still have holes on the outside, right? When they face good wide receivers or functional quarterback play, they still have given up some production. So there is an opportunity I hear still thankfully for Dallas to do something, but we have to see them actually kind of punch up passing, and we haven't seen it yet so far. It's only a month, but still want to see the answer.
I mean, we saw Michael Wilson, who he maybe should have been in the real or fake segment as well. He's still running fewer routes than Rondale Moore. Let's get Wilson running more routes, please. But yeah, I mean, we saw Michael Wilson what he was able to do, and Josh Dobbs in that amazing coaching job that's happening in Arizona. Just again, I'm going to say this. I'm going to keep saying this. Keep Jonathan Gannon off of social media. Like, don't put any videos of him talking onto social media because everything else has been fantastic. So yeah, the Arizona coaching staff's been amazing, but we saw them be able to take advantage of this situation. So I think your point is important. Is one I brought up to Curtis Hirsch on our Sunday recap show, who's a big Cowboys fan on staff. That one time they've had to play offense and it did not happen. It did not work out, and it was because they couldn't score in the red zone. They kept getting down into the red zone against the Cardinals, and they couldn't turn into touchdowns. And so if that problem's going to persist, by the way, on that point, Warren Sharp actually wrote a great article on sharpfootballanalysis.com about how the Cowboys can fix this. So go and read that article. He has 4 suggestions. One of them is for Dak Prescott to run more in the red zone, which fantasy players would absolutely love that. Only 2 of 85 red zone plays have been Prescott runs so far. Dak, by the way, is 25th in rushing fantasy points per game, below Matthew Stafford this year. And that has been the case ever since that ankle injury, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like that has been the case since 2001. He's had 1.41 rushing fantasy points per game with 2 rushing scores total. From 2016 to 2020, he averaged 4 rushing fantasy points per game with 24 rushing touchdowns. I
He's
mean,
always been a weird like mobility quarterback guy because you would think of Dak as like a runner, and he did like very early in his career, but like he was always a guy that got more rushing touchdowns than rushing yards.
yes, very
And
Trevor Lawrence and
yes,
his kind of mobility. Like they're on that same spectrum.
Jordan Love is
They
doing
can't,
that too the last couple
yep,
weeks, where like
yep.
Jordan Love has bailed himself out the touchdown, but like it's coming with like no rushing attempts, or like so it's like very hard to stock those. Where at least Hurts, we know like every time they get to the 1 yard line, they're just gonna run that damn play.
Yeah, yeah, he's going to keep getting those touchdowns. But I do think if we get to see Dak running more, that would at least be good for his fantasy prospects. But we now have 3 years of that's just not happening. Another fun game we have this weekend, maybe more fun than even it looks like on the surface, is the Chiefs traveling to Minnesota to play the Vikings. And I don't know, if Alexander Madison just needed some motivation, but
Look at that.
the schedule
Will
probably
Swift be
helped out.
there? Will Taylor Swift be there this week?
I actually don't know. Does she want to go to Minnesota? It is a great stadium
It's a
in
great
Minnesota,
city
to be
too.
fair. It's a fine city. Yeah, like I've been to Minnesota. I've been to Minneapolis once, and yeah, I was like, hey, this is kind of nice.
It's a
Of
very
all of
clean.
the
It's a very clean downtown.
Exactly, of all of the kind of northern cities I've been to, northern Midwest cities I've been to, I was pleasantly surprised.
Mall of
But
America is not
yeah,
it though. Overrated attraction. Is it? Hey, do you like malls? What if we just made a giant one with more stores?
they tried to do that in Katy, Texas, uh, back, and because it's Texas, the big feature of the mall back when it was built was that there was a massive Bass Pro Shops in it because that's how we roll in in Texas. So anyway, that was fun. But yeah, we did take trips to it whenever it first started in the Houston area. We took trips to Katy to see the Katy Mall. What a time to be alive. That's a very like late 90s Americana kind of thing that we're taking trips to a big mall. Um Either way, sorry, we got off track. Ever since Alexander Madison has been, ever since the Cam Akers trade, Alexander Madison has been efficient. He hadn't been efficient for like 2.5 years prior to that. And then they trade for Cam Akers, and since then he's had 5.1 yards per carry and 18.9% explosive runs. And I don't really know. I'm like, do we trust Alexander Madison now? Like, what are we doing here?
No, I don't. I think it's circumstantial. I think it's a good time to get out if anyone is buying that like efficiency,
I'm with you.
because
Yeah.
he had a lower. Obviously, we're gonna see some Cam Akers, regardless if he ever takes this over or not. But he did have his lowest rate of backfield touches of the season. They are another team that has like some like a non-desirable, like they're hot and cold on the rest of their schedule the rest of the year. But you're not going to get a lot of catches, and you're not going to get a lot of touchdowns out of him. So I think it's a great opportunity to use this short-term window of them facing opponents and being in some scripts to generate some of this efficiency. to move up and package him. He's still kind of an RB2 purgatory guy.
But it's not a bad matchup this week either. So maybe we're going to get another week out of it. He did, you mentioned the passing game. That is kind of where Akers started, I guess, to get a little bit more. Akers ran 6 routes to 9 for Madison, but they only threw what 19 times. Kirk Cousins threw 19 times in that game, so maybe it's just a script thing. He still had 77.3% of the running back carries. You'll take that out of a backfield for sure. And this matchup isn't bad, so maybe we're going to get another week here of Madison. But I guess the point is, or the question for this week for him is, are we going to see one of these situations where where Minnesota is put into a place where they have to throw, and we're going to see a big volume game from Minnesota? We didn't see that last week, and everybody outside of Justin Jefferson, Justin Jefferson is astoundingly good at football, but everybody outside of Justin Jefferson in the passing game we saw collapse. This is the highest total on the board. The Chiefs have faced the 12th most pass attempts. I think this is probably a situation we're going to see the passing volume come back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Vikings are one of these teams you're going to have to watch because we don't get a lot of games like last week, but when they have those games, they're playing non-playoff teams. I mean, you go back to last year and Kevin O'Connell, his games below pass rate expectation are these like the games where they should win. And you expect them to win, and we expected them to win last week, and they did have to come back and win that game. But when they're able to control the kind of the game script, that's when you start to see, because a lot of the pieces outside of Justin Jefferson get there for fantasy because of just the top-down value. And, TJ Hawkinson's a guy I've written about like extensively about that. And then the first 3 weeks of the season, nothing had changed. Like they're throwing the ball 45 times a game, and it doesn't matter that he's not getting a high yards per target or doing anything after the catch. But when you only throw the ball 19 times, all those things get illuminated, right? Jordan Addison, like his target shares and routes per drop back were not a big deal when you're dropping back 45 times, right? When you do it 19 times, you get a goose egg, right? So like they're a team you kind of have to be cognizant with the ancillary pieces on, not getting cookie jarred. This is one of those spots though where we would anticipate a lot of volume. If you're playing DFS or if you want to get cute with Jordan Addison in the flex, obviously Hawkinson you're just going to play because he's a tight end. But that's kind of what we're going to have to keep a thumbprint on when going forward is when the Vikings next week they play the Bears. And like, is that going to be another spot where you like look at it and you're like, yeah, like they should eviscerate the Bears through the air. They can do that. But if it's a game where they only throw the ball 25 times, do the pieces get there? So maybe we revisit that next week. But this game in particular, what's that?
So what I'm hearing is that hold on to Madison for 2 more weeks.
No, I'm saying you use that as the carrot. You say Bears, baby. Bears. You use that as the carrot. Because then 49ers. I mean, nothing on the schedule is like overly scary for the Vikings, but I just think when you look at Madison, like from a ceiling stance, like I think what we got the last 2 weeks is like what you're like happy with, right? Like you're happy with the outcome the last 2 weeks, but like that's not winning you anything.
I mean, he's been fine. But now I have several questions. Do Bears like carrots? I don't actually know. I don't think we have bears.
No, I don't think they do, right?
Part of Texas.
I guess they would eat it. I mean, they're
imagine.
not. I don't think bears are of like the raccoon variety really eat anything, but like I think they prefer meat.
By the way, I might be king of the local raccoon population because
what a thing! What a sentence!
My father-in-law caught a raccoon in a cage and made me go and like set him free. And then as I set him free, kind of like into the dry creek bed, which is all we have in my part of Texas because it doesn't rain ever. But he kind of like he ran up to a tree and then he did the turnaround look, like that meme of that guy that zooms in on him and then he just does the head nod. He gave me the head nod, so I think he's telling his raccoon friends to protect me. So I might be king of the local raccoons. I'm very excited about that development. Also, I think we should get some. Some merch that just says it's okay because he's a tight end.
That's what I've resolved to, man. Just devolved into because I don't even know what you do. Like you have guys like Darren Waller, Dallas Goedert, Kittle, like and just like they're so like, what do you do? What do you do with those guys if you have them? Like, are you really gonna like start playing guys like I said, like Logan Thomas or Jonnu Smith because he's like the hot dude, like over these guys that like are talented but play like this low bar position? It's just the heart of darkness, man. Just absolutely miserable.
So bad. Well, you drop one of them for Cole Kmet, which, like I said it earlier, I dropped Kyle Pitts for Cole Kmet. What a
Just free yourself, just release yourself from the bondage.
didn't want to have to worry about it anymore. Like I was like, because you feel so uncomfortable dropping Kyle Pitts, who's we think still is talented, and you go, but now that I have Cole Kmet, if I want to drop him for someone else, that feels easier to me. So that's it's freeing.
I
It's
mean, every
definitely freeing.
week, Dalton Kincaid is ranked as like a top 10 guy by the industry. And I don't know how many two catch, like 7 yard games he can keep stacking to keep warranting that, but he's there every week.
Right, those 2 catches at 7 yards still making what the tight end 14. So like, how how far off? How far off are you? All right. Last game we wanted to hit on here. We'll hit on it quick. We kind of talked about the Eagles at Rams. We kind of talked about Cooper Kupp situation with Jonathan Taylor. We don't know. What I will say is this is that Tutu Atwell has 35 targets through 4 games. And so even if
Right.
Cooper Kupp comes back, there could be some room here for Puka Nakua and Cooper Kupp to both have, neither are going to have the target shares that we're accustomed to them having. Cooper Kupp historically and Puka this year. But that's there. What I will say kind of to that, however, is that the Rams are second in fourth quarter dropbacks. Their dropback rate in the first 3 quarters is like 20th or 22nd, somewhere in that range. And so if the Rams continue to be good and surprising and continue to maybe even improve a little bit as their young players on defense get a little bit older, get a little more experience, does that volume stick around? And if that volume doesn't stick around, or if they have a game where they're dominant, could we have some concerns with targets? So that's just something to think
Yeah,
about.
they're
But
first in the
the answer
NFL in
is,
plays per game.
yeah, they're doing. Matthew Stafford is unbelievable. Matthew Stafford is playing amazing. Nate Tice of The Athletic had a thread earlier in the week that you can go and find of just some of the throws that Stafford made late in that game against the Colts when they ended up winning in overtime. They should have never been forced to that point, but they end up winning in overtime. Matthew he's back. He's unbelievable, playing really, really spectacularly. What I think is kind of more interesting about this matchup is that the Eagles' run defense is still very good. Kyron Williams is not super efficient to begin with, and he's going to struggle for efficiency this week. But one of the more surprising developments is that we are not scared of this Eagles pass defense, and they're not getting a ton of pressure. They're 22nd in pressure rate through 4 weeks. They're 15th in yards per attempt allowed. That's not terrible, but like I think we thought this Eagles defense was going to be an avoid. It's just not, especially for slot receivers. It's not, which we could get some excitement there if Cooper Kupp and Puka are there. Like I'm just not scared of this pass defense, and that is surprising to me. Is that surprising to you?
Maybe on the outside a little bit, but I mean, definitely the pieces they moved, and we're getting what we wanted from like the regression stand, right? Like we're getting the Eagles are fourth in the NFL in plays per game. Like we're getting like this run out where like they're playing these combative games, and the offense just hasn't been as strong as last year. Last week, now we had the spike week from Jalen Hurts, and we just need to string some more of those along. And hopefully, we get it here because I think that the way the Eagles are structurally built, the way they're defending the run and inviting teams to pass, and they're another one of these teams that has middle of the field issues, that we are going to maybe be playing a lot of overs, a lot of fun games, right? And that's what I like to look at this game. It's probably my favorite DFS game of the week, more so than Vikings Chiefs, just because like that game's harder to stack because the the pieces that we know are safe are expensive, whereas this game has a lot more cheaper, affordable pieces. You can do some fun things. We don't know like what the Cooper Kupp like situation is going to bring, so there could be like some fear where like no one knows what to do, so they don't play either guy, right? You don't play Kupp or Puka when they're like, you brought down the target numbers. Like, look at what the amount of targets Tutu Atwell's getting. Like, there's definitely enough targets here for two good wide receivers in this offense. We've seen it before in the system when Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp were doing it. Like, there's definitely room for both guys. But we're getting what we want from the Eagles. The Eagles are playing these fun back and forth games, and we're starting to see some of the ceiling performances from the Eagles guys, mostly just A.J. Brown the past 2 weeks. But DeAndre Swift's turned into like a really viable asset. It's just a fun environment. I think the Eagles are going to be playing in a lot of fun environments top down.
And to your point about this game, the total has been a bit up from 47.5 to 50.5. It's
Yeah.
now second on the slate in
They play the
total.
Dolphins
And
in a
so
couple weeks. Like that could be real fun.
that could be really fun as well. Yeah, I thought that this game kind of going into the week, I go, ooh, this is going to be kind of an under the radar game for us. And I don't think it's going to be under the radar at all. I mean, we've seen the total movement. Like this is going to be it. This is an interesting, by the way, just kind of to talk about main slate DFS. This is going to be interesting main slate because we have three really high total games. We've got Chiefs and Vikings. We've got Rams and Eagles, and we've got Giants and Dolphins. Which only one side of that
Yeah.
you're you're super interested in. And then there's a pretty big fall off, at least on the main slate, until we get down to
And they're all
Lions
late
and
games.
Panthers at 45 and a half, 44 and a half. Yeah. This could
They're
be a
all late
hammer
games.
weekend. You could feel if you don't have late games here, you could feel a lot better about kind of your money situation in DFS before those late games hit. So there's something
Oh
to
yeah,
look
yeah,
at
yeah. Don't be
as
counting
we
any racks that you're up at one for sure.
definitely not. No, we're there's gonna be a lot of player minutes remaining in all of the tournaments this week. All right, let's move on to Uncut Gems, my favorite segment. I have to carry this segment
You
this week,
do.
Rich. What happened, Rich? No Uncut Gems? Yes, all we see right there is Rashee Rice. That's my Uncut Gem. Love him. I think you love him as well. So why don't I just let you go? You talk a little bit about Rice. What do you like about him
No
this
way,
week?
man. This was your choice. Because I Rice was the guy, and then I was kind of thinking like some of the other guys I was going to put on the list, and there was just nothing. I was like, if I don't have it, I'm not going to force it, right? Like I'm not going to
Yeah,
restrain
absolutely.
myself. I'm gonna be honest, that, and I'm still trying to come back from last week. I had Khalil Herbert in this spot, and I changed him in the morning of, and Heather DM'd me. She's like, "Are you sure you're changing him? You want me to do the picture? You're not going to change it back?" And I was like, "No." And then Khalil Herbert smashed, and I looked dumb. So I just need to recover. I just need to recover, take a week. But I just basically didn't want to do like Robert Woods or something, right? Like I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna do it.
Definitely the worst Khalil Herbert switch happened to you and not me taking him out of a lineup that would have won $1 million. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
You're a
I am
bit at
still
that Bass
beat
Pro,
up
baby.
about it. Oh, I might there might be it might be a Bass Pro trip in my future. So anyway, talking about Rashee Rice, uh, what I like about him at least, his drop back rate has increased to around 50% of the dropbacks the last 2 weeks. The Vikings have given up the third most yards to wide receivers so far this season, 78.7% completion rate, 9.4 yards per catch. They've given up 5 touchdowns. And what I really like about this is that I wrote about this in the Chiefs preview actually, is Rice is the type of receiver, the more all-around receiver that they need to develop and turn into a number one. Their number one, the guy that they're playing the most, is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, which the only thing he does every single game is run wind sprints. He should not be the player that is running the most routes on your team. They need somebody to develop. Rashee Rice is that player, at least in my opinion. And the fact that we've now seen his usage continue to increase, we've seen him actually be effective with that usage and earn targets, which is something we've never seen from Sky Moore. Kadarius Toney is kind of stuck into that gadget player purgatory. If a receiver is going to develop in this situation, I do think it's going to be Rice. This is a good situation. Like we talked about, highest total on the board. The Vikings are a good matchup. So I'm willing to, with all of these wide receivers on bye, if I'm in a bad spot or specifically for DFS, I'm willing to take a shot here on Rice this week.
Yeah, I echo kind of everything you said. I think he's going to draw some steam in DFS where he's priced, and especially in this matchup. Leads the team in targets per route run. They just got to find an answer, right? We're 4 weeks in, and it's the same story they had last year. They're not getting any production out of their wide receivers, and as a default, they're not throwing to these guys. I mean, you brought up Marcus Valdes-Scantling. He's the number one exerciser in the NFL. In terms of players that have run 50 or more pass routes this year, he's run 138 of them. He's only been targeted on 8% of his routes, the lowest rate of all those players. So my man is out there. He's getting the exercise in, cardio machine. But you've got to start getting some guys on the field that you're going to throw the football to. And we've seen them reduce Sky Moore's snaps the last 2 weeks because he just hasn't answered the call. So I think they're trying to figure out what they have in Rashee Rice too, because they just need an answer, right? Like you can't continue to win this way in the NFL, even if you have Travis Kelce.
Yeah, they're targeting wide receivers on like 50% of their targets have gone to wide receiver, something like that.
And part of that is
So
Kelce commands so many targets, but like
yeah, sure.
also the guys are bums that they're rolling out there.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. Like they have no target earners. Rice has at least kind of been a target earner.
Yes.
By the way, he's only 4 games into his career, and he's still a better target earner than what we've seen from Sky Moore, from what we've seen from Justin Watson, what we've seen from Marquez Valdes-Scantling. is Donovan Peoples-Jones, so he's surpassed Marquise Valdes-Scantling now for target rate per route. So I guess
Yeah, I can
he's
give you
jumped him.
the top guys. So let's do 100 or more routes run because the guys that are really out there running. Valdez Scantling is last, 8% target rate per route run. Then Van Jefferson, people even
Oh,
forget
Van.
people forget Van Jefferson's like still like he's out
I
there. Like
forgot
he's
I forgot he was in the. No, we talked about last week. You were right on the Josh Palmer versus Van Jefferson. Who's the better LA wide receiver? Congratulations, you
and
nailed
then
that one.
Donovan Peoples-Jones is third.
There we go.
So he is third from the bottom. Then you've got Alec Pierce, KJ Osborne. Yeah. But yeah.
The who's who of wind sprinting. The who's who of wind sprinting.
A lot of
All right, let's
miles, a
move
lot
on.
of steps. If they're playing with their Apple Watches, a lot of steps. They're hitting those rings. The rings are filling up.
Well, they should have that whoop strap on, man. They'd be dominating the leaderboards with the whoop straps. That's what I'd be doing for sure. All right. Any closing thoughts? We got to get out of here. Any closing thoughts looking into this weekend? Anything you're really paying attention to?
No, I think like that Cowboys 49ers matchup, I think is like the what we're really looking at. I would love to see see if Zay Flowers can take advantage of like another really good spot. I almost thought about putting him in. I just didn't think he qualified for Uncut Gems at this point. See if he can cash in, and then I don't know, teams like some other teams are just fumbling around here, like the Jaguars. Show us something, Jaguars. Like
Do something. Yeah.
the stick meme, do something.
Do
The Saints
something.
the last 2 weeks have just died. Like the Saints have had 2 winnable games that they've just now just not no showed basically. I mean they no showed in the second half of the Packers game. Another game that could they beat the Patriots? Like we'll see. I don't know. So that's where we are, man. Like I just something like do us the Falcons, show us something, and then also Zach Wilson, man. Can he roll over being okay?
Yeah. That's Zach Wilson against the Broncos defense. It's really we used it last week. We used the saying "a stoppable force beats a movable object." We're back at it with the Broncos again. Justin Fields, the stoppable force, was able to take advantage. Can Zach Wilson do it? Derek Carr, like why did they play Derek Carr last week? He couldn't throw. He couldn't throw the ball. Like what? Why? Just let Jameis Winston play. That's why you have Jameis Winston. If you're not going to play Jameis Winston in that situation, trade him to the Jets. Like why aren't you playing Jameis Winston? That whole situation was very
The best part
very
was
odd to
Winston
me.
got to come in and he was like, dude, I am throwing this thing. I am hucking this thing.
One pass and an interception, baby. Love you, Jameis. That's exactly what we want to see. Perfect. Just no notes. Perfection. Uh, Speaking of quarterbacks, I'm actually interested. Are we going to start to see some quarterback benchings? We kind of started it last week with Mac Jones. This feels like the time of year when people start to make changes. We're in week 5 games in. If we need to make some changes, are we going to make those changes? Desmond Ritter, he got the vote of confidence this week. That's a sure sign that we're going to see Taylor Heineke in the very near future. Mac Jones already been benched once. Is that going to continue when the game is 7-5 between the Patriots and the Saints in the third quarter? We're going to get to see Bailey Zappi again. Could we get a little bit weirder? Derek Carr? Could we get a Derek Carr benching, a Daniel Jones benching? It's at least interesting kind of to watch these situations. Like you mentioned, Zach Wilson would be on this list, except he gets the soothing salve known as the Denver Broncos defense. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful we're not going to see this from Zach Wilson. But it's that time of year, and specifically it's that time of year for Atlanta. They faced 2 tests. We said these are going to be their 2 tests. They failed them miserably. It's This team is too good. This defense is improved. They have enough weapons outside. We need to try something else than Desmond Ritter. So we'll see kind of what happens there.
Rough, man. Real rough. But yeah, I'm on par with all those. Looks like Tannehill bought himself some more rope, the roller coaster ride that is Ryan Tannehill this season.
They're on the road this week, so it might be terrible again. At
Yeah, it could
home,
be.
at home, best team in the league. On the road, worst team in the league. So I'm confused by them to start the year. But that's it for us. Thank you for listening. We really do appreciate it. We'll be back next week at 11:30 Eastern on the Sharp Football YouTube live. So if you're listening to podcast, you can go check us out over there. Just go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp. Remember, we have a lot of great content at sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can get 15% off any of the packages we offer there, the all access package, the fantasy package. Both of those come with the worksheet from Rich Hribar every week, as well as his ranking and DFS and stuff like that. go and check that out for sure. And we will be back to talk with you next week.